It began on a frigid February morning when Ellie Mason, a 29-year-old investigative journalist from Chicago, received a plain brown envelope with no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid photo, an image of a snow-covered bridge vanishing into a curtain of fog with a frozen river running beneath it. On the back, written in shaky, hurried handwriting, were the words, "They never left. Cold Creek, find the truth before they find you." Ellie stared at the words for a long time, feeling the unease settle in her stomach. She had received strange tips before. Her online series, True Tales Unveiled, had grown popular for diving into true stories of mysterious disappearances and unsolved crimes. But this felt different. There was something almost personal about it, though she couldn't say why. After a restless night, she started digging. The name Cold Creek brought up almost nothing online. No official records, no local website, not even a Wikipedia page. Only a few forum posts from years ago, one of which mentioned that the town had been a mining settlement in northern Montana that lost itself to the fog. 2 days later, Ellie packed her camera, her recorder, and her laptop and boarded a train heading north through the endless snowfields of the American Midwest. The further she went, the quieter everything became, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Cold Creek was smaller than she expected. Half a dozen streets lined with sagging buildings, their windows fogged with frost. There was a diner, a post office that looked long abandoned, and a handful of locals who stared at her like she had stepped out of a dream they'd tried to forget. Inside Miller's Diner, a place that smelled of burnt coffee and old wood, an elderly man behind the counter wiped his hands on a rag and asked what brought her there. When Ellie mentioned the old bridge and the missing teenagers, his expression froze. He leaned closer, his voice low. "Some places don't want to be found, miss. You should leave before sundown." The words sent a chill down her spine, but she forced a smile and thanked him anyway. She had been warned before. Danger was often the shadow of truth. That night, in her dim motel room, with peeling wallpaper and flickering lights, she combed through old digital archives. Most official reports about Cold Creek were gone, deleted, or classified, but fragments remained. Snippets from local papers, half sentences cached in old data. She learned that in 1989, 5 teenagers had gone missing while camping near the creek. A year later, the sheriff who led the investigation also disappeared. Each report ended with the same haunting line: search terminated due to adverse conditions. The next morning, Ellie drove out of town along a narrow dirt road, her car tires crunching over the frozen ground. The GPS showed nothing but blank space, though she could still see the faint, gray outline of the route ahead. Fog hung low over the trees, so thick it blurred the world into smudges of white and gray. She slowed as the road curved, and there it was, the bridge from the photo, old, wooden, its beams dark with moisture, stretching over a black river that reflected nothing. She stepped out into the biting wind and felt something shift in the silence, as though the forest itself were listening. Snowflakes drifted lazily down, and for a moment, the world felt impossibly still. Then she noticed the marks, faint footprints leading onto the bridge, frozen in the snow, but none coming back. The air seemed to tighten around her. She took a photo, the shutter echoing too loudly in the quiet. When she turned to head back, her car headlights flickered once, twice, then went dark. In the distance, Through the mist, she thought she saw a figure standing at the other end of the bridge, motionless, watching. But when she blinked, it was gone. The wind howled through the pines, carrying a faint whisper that almost sounded like her name. Ellie told herself it was just her mind playing tricks, but when she returned to town, she couldn't shake the feeling that she hadn't been alone out there. Later that night, she reviewed her camera footage, and in one frame, just one, there was a blurred shape standing in the fog behind her, its face obscured, its outline too tall, too wrong. Her heart hammered as she replayed it again and again. And that's when she noticed something else, a faint reflection in the water below the bridge, a second figure standing right beside her, though she had been completely alone. Ellie barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that blurred figure in the fog, frozen behind her like a shadow made of ice. She told herself it could have been a trick of light, a glitch in the camera's focus, or even someone from town following her. But deep down, she knew that something about Cold Creek wasn't right. The air itself felt heavy, charged, as if the place carried an invisible pulse. The motel walls seemed to groan with the wind, and once, just before dawn, she swore she heard faint footsteps in the hallway outside her room, even though the other rooms were empty. When she opened her door, there was no one there, only a folded newspaper lying on the floor, its front page dated 1989. The headline read, "Five local teens vanish near Cold Creek." She stared at the date again, then at the yellowed paper in her trembling hands. It looked old, brittle, not like a reprint or replica. But when she went to show the motel manager in the morning, the newspaper was gone. She decided to visit the old sheriff's office next. The building was half collapsed, its sign barely legible beneath years of grime. Inside, dust floated in the air like slow snow, and rows of metal filing cabinets sat rusting against the walls. Ellie's flashlight beam flickered across faded photos, police badges, and broken chairs. She began searching through the cabinets, each drawer creaking like a warning. Most of the folders were empty, but one, labeled Case 32B, Missing Teens, still had a stack of papers inside. The top page was a report signed by Sheriff Ray Holbrook himself. It described the search operation, footprints found near the creek, a campsite discovered with belongings intact, and strange symbols carved into the trees around it. The last line of the sheriff's report sent chills crawling up her spine. It read, "Found evidence of unauthorized personnel following us. Possible involvement from locals. Must report to higher authorities." The next page was blank, except for one hand-scrawled note. "Do not trust anyone here. The forest watches." As Ellie packed the papers into her bag, she noticed something glinting under the desk. She crouched and pulled out a metal box coated in dust. Inside were a few cassette tapes and a small police recorder. She brushed off one of the tapes. It was marked Night 4. Curiosity clawed at her, and she took it back to her motel room. The recorder was old, but after replacing the batteries, it crackled to life. Static filled the air, followed by the sound of heavy breathing and a man's voice. Tired, scared, desperate. "This is Sheriff Holbrook. Fourth night of the search. The fog's thicker now. The dogs won't go near the bridge anymore. We found one of the tents torn apart, but there was no blood. Just silence. And that sound again. It's like the rivers calling names. Mine included. God help us." The recording ended abruptly, with a faint scream echoing in the distance, followed by what sounded like whispering, soft, rhythmic, almost like chanting. That night, Ellie dreamed of the bridge. She stood at its center, surrounded by fog so dense she could barely see her own hands. Beneath her, the river whispered, the same phrase over and over. They never left. When she looked down, faces stared back from the icy water, pale, distorted, mouths moving silently. She woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, the words still ringing in her head. Her camera was on, recording, even though she had turned it off before bed. On the footage, she was asleep, thrashing, mumbling the same words she had heard in her dream. But at the very end of the clip, shadow moved across the wall, tall, deliberate, human. The timestamp showed it had appeared at 3:17 a.m., the same time she had woken up. Determined to uncover the truth, Ellie returned to the diner the next morning. The same old bartender was there, but his face changed when he saw her. "You shouldn't have come back," he muttered. She pressed him for answers, mentioning the sheriff, the tapes, the missing teens. His hands trembled as he poured her coffee. Finally, he whispered, "They weren't the first. The town was built over something, an old burial ground, maybe older than that. The miners found things in the tunnels, bones, symbols. They sealed it off, but people started disappearing anyway. Holbrook tried to dig too deep. They warned him too." Ellie asked who they were, but he only shook his head and said, "You'll see for yourself if you stay long enough." When she left the diner, she noticed something strange. Every window she passed reflected her image, but slightly off, delayed, as if her reflection were lagging behind her movements. The fog returned thicker than before, swallowing the horizon, and for the first time, she felt truly trapped. As night fell, she decided to drive out of town, but the GPS showed she was circling the same road over and over. The same wooden sign, "Welcome to Cold Creek," kept appearing no matter which direction she turned. The car radio began to buzz with static. Then a faint voice broke through. It was the same as on the sheriff's tape. "You can't leave, Ellie. Not yet." The headlights flickered, and when she looked up, there was a figure standing in the road ahead, tall, motionless, and facing her. She slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. The fog swirled around the figure like smoke, and in the brief flash of her headlights, she saw its face, or what was left of it. It was Sheriff Holbrook, his skin gray and cracked, eyes hollow, mouth moving silently as though trying to speak. The car engine died, leaving only silence and the sound of the river somewhere in the dark, whispering her name again and again. Ellie's body froze as the crack in the ice widened with a sharp, echoing sound that seemed to pierce through the air. Her breath came out in shallow bursts, her camera trembling in her grip. The faces beneath the frozen surface stared up at her, shifting slowly like trapped souls struggling to reach the surface. One face, right at the center, was hers. It smiled faintly, then opened its mouth in a silent scream. She stumbled backward, heart pounding, and dropped the camera. It hit the bridge with a hollow clatter and slid toward the edge, vanishing into the black water below. For a moment, all she could hear was her heartbeat and the soft hiss of wind moving through the trees. Then, from the far end of the bridge, came the faint creak of footsteps, slow, deliberate, one after another. The fog parted slightly, revealing silhouettes, 5 of them, standing motionless in the mist. They looked like the missing teenagers from the 1989 photo she'd seen in the sheriff's report. Only their faces were pale, their eyes black and empty. Ellie turned and ran, The fog closed in around her, swallowing the path, the trees, the very world. It was like running through a nightmare that bent reality. The whispers followed her, rising in pitch until they became screams. When she finally burst out of the woods, gasping, she found herself not at the motel, not at the road, but standing once again in front of the gas station, the same one she'd escaped the night before, only now it was lit up, alive, as if time had rewound. A man stood behind the counter, smiling too widely. "You found it, didn't you?" he asked, voice calm but wrong, like a recording played backward. "The bridge remembers those who cross. It shows them who they really are." Ellie backed away, muttering, "What do you mean?" The man's grin widened. "You've been here before?" Her blood ran cold. "No," she whispered. "I just came this week." The man shook his head slowly. "You came in 1989. You were one of them." She felt dizzy, her mind spinning. That couldn't be true. She wasn't even born then. Or was she? A sudden wave of nausea hit her as flashes flooded her mind. Children laughing near a river, a campfire, a wooden bridge, a scream in the dark. Her head throbbed with pain. She stumbled outside, clutching her temples, and when she looked back, the gas station was gone again. Only fog remained. Desperate, Ellie ran until she reached the edge of the woods again. She spotted faint lights in the distance. Houses, maybe, civilization. But as she moved closer, the lights flickered like dying candles, and she realized they weren't buildings. They were lanterns, hanging from trees. Beneath each lantern was a name carved into wood. Some names she recognized from the missing persons list. One of them was hers. The plaque read, Ellie Mason, missing February 2023. The lantern above it flickered, casting her shadow on the ground. But her shadow wasn't hers anymore. It was taller, thinner, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. She screamed and ran, the forest twisting around her, every path looping back to the bridge. No matter where she turned, the bridge waited, its wooden planks gleaming faintly in the moonlight. At last, exhausted and trembling, she collapsed at the center of it. The whispers had turned to voices now, clear and cruel. "You looked for the truth," they said. "Now, you are part of it." The ice below her began to crack again, spreading in jagged lines. The faces below smiled up at her, waiting. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Please, I just wanted to help." The fog thickened until she couldn't see the shore anymore. She felt the bridge vibrate beneath her, as though something massive moved beneath the water. Then, slowly, a hand broke through the ice, gray, skeletal, reaching for her ankle. She screamed and tried to crawl away, but more hands followed, dozens of them, pulling, clutching, dragging her toward the water. Her last memory before the darkness was falling through the ice into the freezing depths, surrounded by faces whispering her name. Then, silence. Weeks later, when a pair of hikers stumbled upon the abandoned bridge, they found a broken camera half buried in snow. The footage was mostly static, but near the end, a single frame showed Ellie standing on the bridge, staring into the fog, her expression eerily calm. Behind her stood 5 shadowy figures, and just before the tape cut to black, she smiled. Authorities never found a body. Locals claimed they sometimes saw her on misty mornings, standing by the bridge with a camera in her hand, waiting for the next curious soul to arrive. But when the fog thickens over Cold Creek and the wind carries whispers through the trees, the townsfolk lock their doors and say a silent prayer. because they know once you cross the bridge, you never truly leave. Ellie's scream echoed through the fog, swallowed almost instantly by the endless white. Her trembling hands clutched the steering wheel as she stared at the figure in the road. Sheriff Ray Holbrook, or what was left of him. His hollow eyes glowed faintly in the mist, and his mouth twitched as if trying to form words, but only a low, guttural whisper came out. Ellie's heart hammered against her ribs as she fumbled for the keys, twisting them frantically. The car engine sputtered, then roared back to life. She slammed on the gas and tore through the fog, her tires slipping on ice, breath ragged. When she glanced in the rearview mirror, the figure was gone. The road behind her was empty, the fog still thick and unbroken, but she knew she hadn't imagined it. That face, ashen, frozen, and familiar from the old photographs in the sheriff's office, was seared into her mind. When she finally pulled over near an old gas station on the edge of town, her hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold her phone. No signal, no GPS. The fog had followed her, curling around the pumps like smoke from an invisible fire. Inside the gas station, the air smelled of oil and dust. The lights flickered, casting long shadows over the shelves. Ellie called out, but no one answered. A faint radio hummed somewhere in the back, playing an old country song distorted by static. As she stepped closer to the counter, she froze. A map lay open, covered in red circles and scribbled notes. One phrase was repeated over and over. They're under the water. Next to it was a crude drawing of the bridge. Before she could process it, something moved in the back room. A slow creak, followed by a thud. She grabbed her camera and edged toward the door. The smell of damp earth grew stronger, mixed with something metallic. When she pushed the door open, her flashlight flickered over a narrow staircase leading down. The walls were covered in frost, and her breath came out in visible puffs as she descended. The air grew colder, heavier. At the bottom, she found a basement filled with old photographs pinned to the walls. Black and white portraits of people she didn't recognize. Each had their eyes scratched out. Beneath the photos stood several glass jars filled with cloudy water, and inside each jar was something small and pale, like fragments of bone. Her stomach churned as she backed away, nearly tripping over a wooden crate. She opened it, and inside were dozens of VHS tapes, each labeled with a date. The most recent one read, Oct 12, 2019. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up and stuffed it into her bag. She rushed up the stairs, but when she emerged, the gas station was different. The shelves were gone, the radio silent, the dust thicker. It looked abandoned, as if it hadn't been touched in years. Her car, too, was gone. The fog pressed against the glass windows like a living thing. Panic clawed at her chest, but she forced herself to breathe. She had proof now. Photos, tapes, the sheriff's reports. She just had to make it out alive. That night, she found shelter in an old cabin at the edge of the woods. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. She sat by the small fireplace, clutching her recorder. "This is Ellie Mason," she whispered into the mic, her voice trembling. "I think Cold Creek is hiding something far older than any of us realize. I've found evidence of disappearances, rituals, and something in the fog. If I don't make it out, someone needs to know." She paused, swallowing hard. "They're watching. Even now." A soft creak echoed from the hallway. She turned, shining her flashlight toward the noise. A shadow darted past the doorway. Fast, too fast to be human. She stumbled back, knocking over her camera. When she picked it up, the screen flickered, showing static. Then, for a split second, the reflection of a woman standing behind her. But when she turned, the room was empty. Hours passed in a blur of fear. She couldn't tell if she was awake or dreaming anymore. At some point, she played the VHS tape she'd taken from the gas station. The footage was grainy, showing the same bridge she'd visited. A man, Holbrook, stood in the fog, holding a lantern. Behind him, faint figures moved, barely visible. The camera zoomed in on the river, and for a brief moment, dozens of faces could be seen beneath the ice, eyes open, mouths moving. Then the tape cut to black, replaced by words scratched into the film. The water remembers. Ellie shut it off, trembling. She could hear the wind outside shifting into whispers, voices overlapping, some calling her name. By morning, she was no longer sure how much time had passed. Her phone battery was dead, her watch frozen at 3:17 a.m., the same time the shadow had appeared in her motel room. She decided to head back to the bridge, to end it, to see for herself what was hiding there. The road was silent, the fog thicker than ever. She walked slowly, camera in hand, every sound magnified in the cold air. When she reached the bridge, she saw something new, fresh footprints in the snow, leading to the center. As she followed them, the air grew colder, heavier, until she could see her breath forming clouds. She leaned over the railing, staring into the black water below. Something moved beneath the ice, slow and serpentine. The whispers returned, louder now, urgent. Then she saw them, the faces, the same ones from the tape, pale and distorted, pressed against the underside of the ice. Her reflection stared back at her, but it wasn't her anymore. The eyes were too dark, the mouth curved into a knowing smile. The water cracked, a thin line splitting the surface. And in that instant, Ellie realized the truth. Cold Creek didn't just take people, it remembered them. It kept them, and it was remembering her now. The wind over Cold Creek carried a sound like weeping that winter, though no one was left alive to hear it. The government had fenced the area off and declared it uninhabitable due to chemical instability in the groundwater. But locals knew it wasn't chemicals that poisoned the soil. It was something older, something the earth itself was trying to bury again. Still, rumors have a way of crawling past locked gates, and one night in early December, a college student named Mara Linwood found herself driving toward the forbidden road, guided by curiosity and a growing obsession with the Cold Creek footage circulating on the dark corners of the internet. There were videos, or fragments of them, said to be from Ellie Mason and Daniel Cross, edited together by anonymous users who claimed to have found the footage in the town's ruins. One frame, analyzed and enhanced by online sleuths, showed a figure standing on the bridge, smiling directly into the camera. Its eyes, they said, were still moving. Mara was studying journalism at Oxford, drawn to truth and terror in equal measure. Her dissertation was on digital hauntings and the persistence of memory in modern myth. She didn't believe in ghosts, she believed in patterns. So, when she found that coordinates hidden in the metadata of Daniel's last upload pointed to a location on the outskirts of Cold Creek, she decided to go there herself. For research, she told herself, though a deeper part of her knew it was more than that. She wanted to see the bridge, to feel what they felt, Snow had already begun to fall by the time she reached the valley. The air was thick, the cold sharp enough to cut skin. She parked near the rusted gate, marked with a faded government seal. Restricted area. No entry. Her flashlight beam quivered through the fog as she climbed over the barrier and stepped into the silence. The world seemed to hold its breath. The trees stood like sentinels, their branches reaching into the mist. After an hour of walking, the path opened up, and there it was. The bridge, just as the photos had shown, just as Ellie had described. It looked ancient, older than the town itself, its timbers black with rot. The river beneath was frozen, smooth as glass, but the air above it shimmered faintly, as though the fog were breathing. Mara turned on her camera. "This is Mara Linwood," she whispered, her voice trembling with both fear and awe. "I've reached Cold Creek. The stories are real. The town, the bridge, everything. If anyone sees this, I just want you to know I'm doing this to understand." She stepped forward slowly, the wood creaking under her boots. The fog thickened behind her, cutting off the forest. Her flashlight beam flickered, then died. Only the red recording light blinked in the dark. She took another step. The air grew colder. Beneath the ice, something stirred. A faint tapping sound rose from the water, rhythmic, like knuckles on glass. Then came the voices, soft, overlapping, impossible to locate. Some cried, some laughed. One voice whispered, almost gently, "Turn back, Mara." She froze. The voice was familiar, her own. She dropped the camera, its lens spinning to capture the bridge from below. What it recorded next would later be described by investigators as impossible. Dozens of hands pressed against the underside of the ice, pale and skeletal. Among them were faces, their mouths open in silent screams. The ice cracked once, then again, and then Mara was gone. Weeks later, a park ranger discovered her abandoned car near the restricted gate. Inside was a USB drive labeled Cold Creek Truth. On it were hours of footage, distorted, fragmented, looping endlessly. The same final scene played again and again. The bridge in fog, the frozen river below, and a woman's voice whispering, "The water remembers." In the background, faint but unmistakable, came laughter. Ellie's, Daniel's, and someone else's, deeper, older. The authorities sealed the footage and reinforced the fencing around Cold Creek. But it made no difference. People still came. Every few years, someone disappeared. And every time, a new video surfaced online. Shaky, grainy, but real enough to make your heart stop. In each one, the same thing happens. The camera turns toward the fog, and a voice says, "Welcome back." Some swear that if you pause the footage at exactly the right frame, you'll see all of them there. Ellie, Daniel, Mara, standing on the bridge, waiting for whoever's watching. Their faces are smiling, their eyes are open, and behind them, in the fog, something vast and ancient looms. Patient, hungry, remembering. And so, the legend of Cold Creek endures, whispered across message boards and campfires, shared in podcasts and midnight documentaries. Some call it a curse. Some say it's a mirror, that the fog shows people what they fear most about themselves. But those who've seen it say the truth is simpler. Cold Creek isn't haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by memory. And once you've seen the bridge, once you've heard the whispers, a part of you never leaves. Because the bridge doesn't take lives. It collects stories. It keeps them, one by one, until the fog itself becomes the voice of every soul it has claimed, telling and retelling, forever, the true tale unveiled. A year passed after Ellie Mason's disappearance, and Cold Creek became a ghost town for real. The authorities had come and gone, declaring it unsafe due to structural collapse and unstable terrain. No one mentioned the fog. No one spoke of the bridge, but the locals who still lived within 30 miles of the town, scattered farmers, hunters, and truckers, knew better. They avoided the roads that led north after dark, and when the fog rolled in, thick and white, they bolted their windows, drew their curtains, and refused to answer knocks, no matter how familiar the voice outside might sound. Rumors grew like weeds. Some said the spirits of the missing appeared in the mist, whispering for help. Others claimed the fog itself was alive, an ancient thing that swallowed the living and kept their voices forever. And then, one evening in late October, a new visitor arrived. His name was Daniel Cross, a documentary filmmaker from London known for his obsession with urban legends. He had stumbled upon Ellie Mason's unfinished video series online. Her last upload, titled The Cold Creek Mystery, Part 1, ended abruptly with her walking toward the bridge. The video had millions of views and countless theories in the comments. Some said it was staged, others swore it was real. Daniel didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in stories, and the journalist in him couldn't resist the chance to find out what really happened. He booked a flight to Montana and drove north into the cold, endless wilderness. By the time he reached what was left of Cold Creek, night had already fallen. The fog rolled low over the ground like a living tide. Daniel set up camp in the abandoned motel, the same one Ellie had stayed in. The air inside was stale, frozen in time. Dust coated everything, but there were still faint signs of her presence. A coffee cup on the nightstand, a broken phone charger, a single Polaroid photo of a bridge pinned to the wall. He placed his camera on the bed and began recording. October 27th, he said into the lens. My name is Daniel Cross, and this is an investigation into the disappearance of Eleanor Mason. If you're watching this, it means I found something, one way or another. His voice echoed slightly in the empty room. He didn't notice at first, but when he played back the footage, there was a faint second voice behind his own, whispering something he couldn't quite make out. The next morning, Daniel began exploring the town. Everything was still, eerily preserved, as though the town had frozen the moment Ellie vanished. He found Miller's Diner first. Inside, the tables were set, the coffee pots full of mold, the cash register open and empty. On one wall, he noticed a framed photograph of the town taken decades ago. There were people smiling in front of the diner, miners, families, children. His stomach dropped when he recognized one of the faces, Ellie. She was standing near the back, barely visible, but unmistakable. He stared at it for a long time before stepping back, his heart pounding. It didn't make sense. He checked the photo's label. It was dated 1989. Shaken, Daniel returned to his car, but his GPS refused to connect. The screen blinked, showing the same message over and over. Recalculating route to Cold Creek. It was as if the town didn't want him to leave. He decided to keep going, to find the bridge that had become the heart of every rumor. The fog thickened as he approached the edge of the woods, and soon he could barely see 5 feet ahead. The forest was silent, suffocatingly so. His breath formed clouds in front of him as he pressed on, following faint footprints frozen in the snow. After what felt like hours, the fog parted just enough to reveal the outline of the bridge. It looked worse than he'd imagined. Rotted wood, missing planks, and rusted chains. The air around it was unnaturally still. He stepped closer, his camera recording every sound. "This is it," he whispered. "The bridge from Ellie Mason's footage." His voice trembled, though he didn't want to admit it. He aimed his flashlight at the icy river below, and for a moment, he thought he saw something move, shadows shifting under the surface. He knelt, leaning closer, and that's when he saw it. A hand pressed against the underside of the ice, pale and motionless. He stumbled backward, but curiosity pushed him to keep filming. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "There's someone, under the ice." The wind picked up suddenly, howling through the trees. The fog began to swirl, forming strange, human-like shapes. Daniel turned the camera toward the bridge, just as a figure stepped out of the mist. It was a woman, tall, her hair long and wet, her clothes tattered, her skin was gray, her eyes hollow. "Ellie?" he whispered. She didn't answer. She just stared at him with a faint, broken smile. He took a step forward, but she raised her hand slowly, pointing toward the water. "They're waiting," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Don't listen to them. Don't cross." Her expression twisted suddenly, her eyes wide with fear. "Run!" Daniel turned and bolted back toward the woods, the camera jerking wildly in his hand. Behind him, the bridge groaned like it was being torn apart. He could hear footsteps chasing him, fast, too many to count. He tripped over a root and fell hard, the camera flying from his grasp. As he scrambled to grab it, he looked up and froze. The same 5 figures from Ellie's video stood in front of him, their faces pale and smiling. One of them spoke in a voice that sounded like his own. "You came to tell our story," it said softly. "Now you're part of it." The fog swallowed him whole. Days later, a rescue team searching the area found Daniel's car abandoned on the main road. The footage recovered from his camera ended abruptly, showing his terrified face illuminated by flashlight, whispering, "If you find this, don't come here. Cold Creek isn't a place, it's a memory, and it remembers everyone." The tape ended with a faint sound of laughter echoing in the distance, followed by the creak of a bridge and a splash of water. To this day, Cold Creek remains off the maps, its roads erased, its name unspoken, but sometimes, on cold nights, hikers claim to see a light moving through the fog, a flickering glow like a lantern crossing an invisible bridge. And if you listen closely, beneath the wind and the water, you can still hear voices, Ellie's, Daniel's, and countless others, whispering the same haunting truth. They never left.